ready to move to our next speaker, who is Mitch Glaser from AirBnB. So Mitch has been with AirBnB for 5 years and currently manages the talent systems team at AirBnB, responsible for the human capital management application and related integrations to vendor applications and support employees' experience at AirBnB. Mitch, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, perhaps good evening, depending upon where you're at in the world. Looks like I might be showing the wrong screen here. It's my notes slide. Can someone confirm what they're actually seeing? Is it just a single slide, or are you seeing two slides here?
We are seeing both with the next slide on the right.
Okay. Let me see if I can just swap that. There we go. Looks like that's the
perfect.
Okay, very good. So first and foremost, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this wonderful forum. I mean, this has been really engaging and very interesting, even from my perspective. When I was talking with Bill Carter about presenting here, we were talking actually some time ago about some of the quick pivots that I've had to do personally, even what my team has supported for Airbnb. I've actually been at Airbnb for 5 years now. I've been within the IT team that entire time. Used to manage the telephony systems for our contact centers. Now, within the last 2 years, I've actually managed the talent systems, or as many people understand it, traditionally has been kind of the HR info systems of the past. But have really had to adapt and work with my team specifically, and also supporting those throughout the organization in how we have adapted to this working in a remote paradigm. I apologize in advance. My webcam is not visible, so at least you get a little bit of picture of what I might look like there. But at the same time, wanted to dive in and talk a little bit about maybe this was fortuitous timing. Apologies, fortuitous timing on my side, because as I joined the talent systems team, realized that I needed to structure my team for what I call executional excellence. The team was originally, when I joined, was structured in a way that, as I'll call it, maybe would swarm to whatever problem was most poignant at the time. And I recognized initially, I said, look, we need to organize ourselves in a way that allows us to plan appropriately for strategic benefit with our business partners. We need to organize so that we can deliver explicitly with the traditional project and program management structure with business systems analysts that can also support and bring subject matter expertise to various requests that the business bring to us. And at the same time, we need to operate and align ourselves so that we can maintain the operational support for the keeping the lights on activities that we have to do day in, day out, month after month, quarter after quarter on a relatively repeatable basis. When we'd actually, set this structure about the middle of last year and really started to divide and conquer within our teams, and really helped provide a lot of clarity for our teams in terms of who was accountable for what specifically. And the team then was really able to allow others with a strong skill set to be able to defer to those that had said, look, I'm going to be the primary owner of, shall we say, time off plans within the system, or I will be the primary owner of payroll. And so we had the opportunity to develop specific expertise, and at the same time, with the in conjunction with the support of my solutions architect, start developing a long-term roadmap that we would be able to continue to stay focused on as a North Star for not only allowing us to be able to say no occasionally, but when it was appropriate. So developing this team structure and executing as such really helped us prepare unwittingly for what was around the corner in March of 2020. What we really, what I've found, particularly managing my team remotely specifically, is that there's a very real need for keeping those teams connected in a distanced world. And what we've actually landed on is that, there are some people that are relative introverts within the team. There are others who are extroverts who really miss that camaraderie with their team. We understand that there's, a need for dedicated person-to-person time that's weekly to make sure that we have the appropriate support required for those individuals. We have identified blockers that are inhibiting success, and we're able to also continuously discuss about career objectives. And finding that really focusing even on that last point around the career objectives, I think has been very important in terms of retention for my teams at least, and I know for others that use the same practice, is making sure that people understand that they have a career path, and really staying focused on that has been very helpful to make sure that people know that they've got a place, and has reduced attrition tremendously. Supporting caregivers is a huge issue. I know not just within Airbnb, not just within my team, but it's across the industry. I've asked my employees specifically to live out loud, where I've said, look, please tell us if there is a time that you need to go prepare dinner for your family, or you need to start a Zoom session for your kids who are starting school in a distanced paradigm. Let's all understand exactly what those times are. And everybody has been very supportive and even very defensive of making sure that those people have and take that time for themselves so that they can focus on the personal aspects of their lives, providing care for their families, elders, children, etc. It's really been very supportive, within the entire team to make sure that there is that level of air cover, if you will, for those teams. We also really are starting to grapple with connecting with new team members who are joining in this post-COVID virtual world. We have acknowledged, obviously, there is hiring that still is going on for teams that are continuing to grow. It's incredibly important that we need to stay very focused, making sure that we can introduce those teams, really highlighting what their past prior successes are, what their skill sets are, what they're bringing to the table, and allowing them to integrate as naturally as possible in a disconnected world. But it has been, there has been some challenges here, no doubt, in making sure that we're able to adjust to those new team members. But staying very purposeful and focused on that has been very helpful for us for those new team members. We found that we also need to deliver with a level of empathy. Now, empathy doesn't necessarily mean, the way that I'm defining it here specifically, that it is just empathetic for our business users, but we've also set some very specific borders and guidelines. Doing that in setting those borders and guidelines really has helped us focus on delivery despite all of the distractions that we've got. Let me explain. We've taken more and more to the approach of really defining a minimum viable product, or as we call it, an MVP within our business community. We'll ask people, look, we know what you're looking for in terms of a configuration perhaps that needs to be built out in a HRIS system. What is the absolute bare minimum that you need to be able to satisfy those business requirements? I'm really focusing on that, and also holding the business accountable for prioritizing ruthlessly, as I'll call it, really demanding those business cases. It has really kind of stopped people in their tracks. We've seen the superfluous asks of our team drop when we say, look, you're going to have to provide us a very concrete business case so that we can compare the return on investment to another similar request that has a very concrete return on investment. That level of prioritization and demanding for clear definition of what the outcome is going to be has been very, very successful, at least for my team, in making sure that we're not taking on too much, as perhaps we may have done in the past when we had larger teams. We've also have found success in holding others accountable with compassion. What I mean by that here specifically is we're defining and aligning on clear accountability and responsibility. So in terms of setting up a traditional RACI, to understand who's accountable, who's responsible, who is going to be consulted, who's going to be informed, I've found that there are oftentimes some aha moments when you say to somebody, well, I see you as being accountable for making sure that this is going to get done. And another member of your team is going to be the one who's going to produce this deliverable for us. It has actually created some very interesting and charged discussions at the beginning of projects or requests, but we found that it actually makes things much, much smoother. This has always been a best practice for us within our team, but we've been, again, very relentless on demanding the need for a RACI and defining that clear accountability and responsibility upfront, because it saves the discussion or even perhaps the disagreements for later. In terms of supporting the needs of our remote workforce, there's been a couple of things that we've actually done, particularly within my team, is really making sure that we have set a focus on self-service for both managers and employees. As a smaller startup company, we may have had the bandwidth to be able to actually deliver what I'll call a white glove service, but where someone would actually walk somebody through a process, or they basically would execute a task within our HR system specifically on the behest of, or at the behest of someone else. That actually, again, perhaps worked when we were a much smaller startup company, but as we've grown at Airbnb, we've found that not only do our business counterparts wish and desire for more of the self-service components, it's actually been a much better way to distribute workloads, delivering self-service functionality. If someone, we'll take a very simplistic example here. If someone needs to, they've found a different job and they're leaving the company, there is effectively a self-termination process that is very simple and straightforward, that we can actually ask the employee to work with their manager to process all of the paperwork, taking effectively what used to be dozens of other people out of the process in helping to see someone exit the company amicably. This has been a very small component, but it's actually been very helpful for our entire business community to not have to rely on someone else and wait behind a queue to actually deliver some very simple tasks. We've also found that content and knowledge hubs have been critical, like never before, where we can simply address so many simple or routine requests. We can revert people back to those knowledge hubs where there's very good and detailed documentation for people to actually follow steps on their own. Quite honestly, these knowledge and content hubs haven't always existed within our organization, but we really, again, perhaps just in time for this virtual world, had spent a good amount of time investing in developing those content and knowledge hubs to serve our entire community. We've also streamlined and defined, kind of keyword on defined business processes to support company policies. I'll take another example here, talking about permissions for working remotely. There are, Airbnb has actually announced that they have the ability, employees have the ability to work remotely within their home regions, or perhaps within the US through August of 2021. We've actually gone through and established the principles and drafted the process for people to understand where it's actually permissible for them to work based on state and local regulations, perhaps where Airbnb is incorporated to do business. X number of states out of all 50 states where it's permissible, being able to provide that self-service option and helping our employees understand as they enter the HR system when they're changing their address, if they receive a denial because they want to go work in Alaska, they'll understand why that is. And they'll have to choose a different place or basically stay sheltered in place wherever they're at. Really, also supporting the documentation of what that looks like and making sure that, kind of going back to those knowledge and content hubs, has been very helpful for us to really kind of point people back and help them really grasp the concepts of shifting to a more efficient self-service method. Now, we're still here for those escalations when we need to as teams, but we've also found a great deal of enthusiasm around the self-service options that we've actually provided for our employees. An interesting aspect, and this is actually a New York Times article that came out on the 28th of August entitled "College is Everywhere Now," would encourage folks to even check that article out. It was a really interesting article, not just around how college is being held everywhere. Personally speaking, I've got 2 daughters that are college age that are for good, bad, or indifferent, depending upon what my wife and I, what our opinion is at the time of day and how much underfoot they are in our home. We'd love it if they were actually out of the house attending school, as would they, but that's not the reality that we're working in. There are some students throughout the entire United States that have actually embraced, if you will, mini classrooms where they're actually leveraging even Airbnbs for long-term rentals, where they're actually a small group that are holding up in a long-term rental simply to actually facilitate learning and conversation and interaction in a very traditional manner, but still in a distanced or remote manner. We're finding the same thing even with some individuals who want to be able to work remotely in a different location. People aren't getting on international flights like they used to, but they're also leveraging long-term rental opportunities to be able to go work in a remote location as long as there's the appropriate bandwidth and connectivity, allowing them to kind of change the scenery as opposed to having to be stuck at home 100% of the time with all of their family members, where they can actually have different choices. It's an interesting article that is, it's a good read, and I encourage everyone to read up on that when you've got the time. So I'm actually that closes, a lot of what I had wanted to discuss here. I think, Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that there's a couple of questions that may be appropriate to address at this point.
Mitch, it's Lisa here, so I'll be asking some questions. Just to reflect back to the article you mentioned, I read this article and it's really interesting what's happening with the students, but also with the content creators who are renting houses to produce and to create new content for the social media. So let's get to the questions. So my first question is, what's the most surprising adaptation your team have had to make for its response to COVID-19?
I would say the most surprising adaptation is that the teams have made the switch to virtual work very quickly. Personally, and I know I'm not alone here, I miss the whiteboard tremendously for collaboration and alignment, where I've always said, a picture can truly tell 1,000 words. I've seen people adapt to leverage online messaging tools where virtual teams can be created. If anything, this has actually helped to include teams around the globe who may not have been included in discussions in the past due to time zone differences. So if, for instance, now you have a team member that posts a message in a team channel, team members across APAC, EMEA, North America see the messages that have been posted, and they have a situational awareness and can help carry work forward in a true follow the sun model. This has really helped to improve the sense of belonging for team members. The sense of belonging is a really important aspect from Airbnb's core values, but it really has helped to facilitate that level of belonging where traditionally a sidebar conversation may have happened during the lunch hour in a San Francisco-based office. Now that same conversation is actually happening, albeit in a digital format. It's happening in a manner where everyone has visibility to it, and they're not getting surprised by decisions or outcomes that may be decided as a result. Overall, I'd say that we've seen many people embrace the virtual world as best can be, but I do know our offices are missed.
Okay, and how are your teams thinking about the future of work? Do you see any lasting impact from this extended working from home?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that team members at Airbnb have been permitted to work from home through August of 2021. This has required teams to embrace this change for longer than originally anticipated. I'd say the upside here is that teams now know that they will have the option to be largely remote for almost a year from today. This is giving those teams the certainty to plan for being remote, however. One aspect that teams are actually grappling with now is how to embrace new members, as I discussed a little bit ago, who've never met their teammates in real life, without the opportunity to assimilate naturally, learning others' body language, their preferences, things of that nature. One way that I've found that we've helped to address this is to institute regular virtual non-work meetings. And that's been difficult, obviously, where we say, look, there's an optional non-work meeting, but we've had incredible attendance by my teams where we're actually having virtual lunches, even virtual happy hours, where we'll literally, after a team or all company-wide meeting, we'll meet at 5 or 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, and literally we'll have a glass of wine, a beer, or a cocktail, still over a virtual format, but where we try to make sure that we're catching up on each other's lives as we would have done more organically in the real working situation. But this has helped team members who specifically thrive on personal connections to keep those human interactions with what I'll call some sense of normalcy.
Yeah, and as you saw also from the our survey, people missed real connections and interaction with others.
Indeed.
We also spoke about performance and metrics and productivity. So how have your teams approached performance expectations of their teammates during these disrupted times?
This is a great question, and it's one where my team is specifically partnered with the HR teams within Airbnb. We've made some very intentional changes here to ensure that both managers and direct reports are on the same page. When we're all together in the office, performance discussions could obviously occur very naturally. My team has actually very recently worked with our HR counterparts to design tools within our HR systems that help facilitate both more frequent interactions and even ad hoc interactions. This is helping to make performance management discussions occur in a more fluid manner. Instead of having what I'll call the institutionalized biannual performance review process that have been traditionally a very intensive and laborious process, they've now become more frequent discussions and even more natural in a way that's helping to bring managers and direct reports together on the same page where they stand with respect to performance. I'll add a little bit to that, in the past, those discussions have been very top-down, if you will. Some of the tools that we've created recently are a request basis where a direct report can specifically reach out to his or her manager or even his or her peers to solicit feedback based on a timely delivery of a project or something along those lines that have really helped to develop some of that real-time feedback for those individuals.
So I would like to ask you my last question. Do you have any specific ask for this community that can collaborate or help to solve some challenges together?
Well, in general, what I'd love for us to all be able to do is to remain connected, so where we can continue to share best practices. I've recently had personally an influx of peer-to-peer interactions where we've come together to address unique problems in this now more disconnected world, if you will. The broader we can all expand our networks, in my opinion, the more diversity of thought that we can bring to the table to help solve our problems, not only addressing business problems, but helping to create a broader sense of belonging and inclusion for us all.
Okay, thank you so much, Mitch. It has been a pleasure to have you on this event and to see your presentation.